Black beekeeper sells honey at market. White CEO buys jar daily for year, not for honey, to hear his philosophy about life. The glass walls of Pinnacle Enterprises reflected Seattle's skyline like a crown of steel and ambition. Victoria Hastings stood at her corner office window, watching the morning fog lift from Elliott Bay, her coffee cooling in a porcelain cup that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. She was 32, and already COO of a tech consulting firm that billed Fortune 500 companies 7 figures for advice she could deliver in her sleep. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who'd never questioned whether she deserved to be there. Her assistant knocked twice before entering. "Your 8:30 is here, Victoria. The merger team from Boston. Tell them I need 5 more minutes." Victoria didn't turn around. She was thinking about the board meeting, about the acquisition that would cement her path to CEO by year's end. Her father had built this company from nothing, but she'd tripled its value in 3 years. Merit, she believed, always rose to the top. "Also, your mother called about the fundraiser Saturday. She wants to know if you're bringing anyone. Tell her I'm bringing my work ethic." Victoria finally turned, smoothing her $1,200 blazer. "That's all the company I need." She spent the morning demolishing the Boston team's projections, her words sharp and precise. During lunch, she scrolled through emails while eating a salad she didn't taste. Her college roommate texted about meeting up, but Victoria was too busy for nostalgia. She had metrics to hit, competitors to bury, a corner office that would one day have her name on the door. By 3 o'clock, she needed air. The Pike Place Market was 6 blocks away, and she sometimes walked there to clear her head before afternoon meetings. The crowd annoyed her, tourists blocking sidewalks, street performers expecting tips for noise. She navigated through them like obstacles in a video game, her heels clicking impatiently on the cobblestones. That's when she saw the honey stand, a simple wooden table with glass jars catching the afternoon light, each one labeled in careful handwriting. Behind the table sat a black man in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, wearing a faded denim shirt and reading a worn paperback. He looked up when her shadow fell across his table, and something about his calm expression irritated her immediately. He had no hustle, no pitch ready, just patience. "Everything's raw and local," he said quietly. "From my hives in Beacon Hill." Victoria picked up a jar, more to have something to do with her hands than from interest. "How much? $12? She almost laughed. Whole Foods charged $8 for the imported stuff, but she pulled out a 20, suddenly wanting to prove something she couldn't name. "Keep the change. I'd rather give you change and have you come back." He handed her $8 and a small wooden honey dipper. "First jar comes with this. It's made from reclaimed cedar." Victoria walked away, feeling strangely unsettled, like she'd lost an argument that never happened. "Hello? The Shade of Love family? So happy you're here." Before we jump into the next part of the story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments. Also, how's the story been so far? We love reading your thoughts. Yes, every single comment. And it really keeps us motivated. Let's aim for 50 comments on this video. Think we can hit it? Your support means the world, so don't forget to comment, share, and keep the energy flowing. That evening, Victoria met her father for dinner at Canlis, where the waitstaff knew their preferences, and the city sparkled below like a circuit board. Gregory Hastings had built Pinnacle from a one-room consultancy into a powerhouse, and he expected his daughter to take it further. "I heard you made the Boston team cry," he said, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. "They came unprepared. I don't have patience for incompetence." "Good. Sentiment is expensive." He raised his wine glass. "Your mother thinks you're too hard on people. I think you're exactly hard enough. The world rewards strength, not sympathy." Victoria thought about the beekeeper's calm refusal to accept her tip, how it had felt like judgment. "Do you ever think about the people who don't make it? Who work just as hard but never get ahead?" Her father laughed, the sound echoing off the restaurant's angular walls. "They don't work as hard, Victoria. They just think they do. Success isn't complicated. You sacrifice, you focus, you outwork everyone else. Anyone who tells you otherwise is making excuses." She wanted to believe him. She'd always believed him. Her childhood had been one long lesson in meritocracy. The best schools because she earned the grades, the best opportunities because she seized them. She'd never asked for special treatment, never needed it. Everything she had, she'd worked for, or at least that's what she told herself, as the waiter refilled her wine glass and her father's words settled over her like an expensive coat. Her best friend from business school, Amanda Chen, called as Victoria drove home in her Tesla. "Please tell me you're coming to the charity gala this weekend. You've declined the last 4 events." "I'm busy, Amanda." "You're always busy. Remember when we used to have fun? When we talked about changing the world instead of just dominating it?" "We were naive." Victoria pulled into her building's underground garage, where her assigned spot sat between a Porsche and a Mercedes. "The world doesn't change because we want it to. It changes because someone with power decides it should. And you're going to be that someone?" "That's the plan." But as Victoria rode the elevator to her penthouse, Amanda's question echoed uncomfortably. She'd always assumed power and progress were the same thing. Now, for reasons she couldn't explain, she wasn't entirely sure. Victoria found herself back at Pike Place Market 3 days later, telling herself it was just convenient, just a pleasant walk before meetings. The beekeeper was there again, his table arranged exactly the same way, though now there were small information cards describing different honey varieties. She approached, already reaching for her wallet. "Clover or wildflower today?" he asked, looking up from his book. "The wildflower's got more character, stronger flavor. I'll take clover." Victoria didn't know why she contradicted him, only that she needed to establish something. "The wildflower sounds too intense." "Fair enough." He wrapped the jar in brown paper with practiced efficiency. "You work around here?" "Pinnacle Enterprises, 6 blocks north." She said it like it should mean something, waiting for recognition or at least interest. He just nodded. "Good location. Close to the water." Victoria frowned. "We're one of the largest tech consulting firms in the Northwest. We advise companies on digital transformation and market positioning." "Sounds important." His tone wasn't dismissive, but it wasn't impressed either. He handed her the wrapped jar. "I hope the honey's good for you." "You don't seem particularly motivated to sell more than 1 jar at a time," she observed, and realized too late how condescending it sounded. But he just smiled. "I sell what people need. Most folks don't need a dozen jars of honey. They need 1 good jar, and maybe they'll come back when it's empty." He gestured to the market around them. "This isn't about volume. It's about connection." Victoria wanted to explain how business actually worked, how growth and scale and market capture were what separated hobbyists from successful entrepreneurs. But her phone buzzed with a meeting reminder, and she walked away feeling like she'd been dismissed by someone who had no right to dismiss her. That afternoon, during a presentation about maximizing client retention, she found herself thinking about his words. Connection versus transaction. She pushed the thought away. Her company didn't pay her to philosophize about feelings. They paid her to deliver results. And results required clear metrics, aggressive targeting, and the elimination of inefficiency. Connection was just another word for wasted time. Her colleague Derek noticed her distraction. "Everything okay? You seem somewhere else." "I'm fine. Just thinking about the market." She didn't specify which market. "Sometimes I wonder if we're so focused on the numbers that we forget there are actual people on the other end." Derek laughed. "That's what the customer service team is for. We're strategists, Victoria. We think big picture. Let someone else worry about the warm fuzzies." She nodded, but the certainty she usually felt was developing small cracks. A week passed before Victoria returned to the market. She told herself she'd just run out of honey, though the jar was still half full in her kitchen. This time the beekeeper had a small crowd around his table, a mother with 2 kids, an elderly man in a veteran's cap, a young woman in scrubs who looked exhausted from a night shift. Victoria waited impatiently, checking her phone, conscious of the time slipping away from her scheduled afternoon. The beekeeper spoke to each person like they had all the time in the world. He told the kids about how bees communicate through dancing. He gave the veteran a discount and thanked him for his service. He asked the nurse about her shift and actually listened, to her answer about understaffing and impossible hours. "Your hospital's up on First Hill?" he asked. My grandmother worked there 30 years, housekeeping. Said the nurses were the only ones who treated her like she was human. The nurses' eyes filled with tears. It's the housekeepers who keep us sane. They know everyone's names, remember our birthdays. Last week, one of them brought me soup when I had the flu. She bought 3 jars of honey for my co-workers. We all need something sweet in our lives. When the crowd cleared, Victoria stepped forward, suddenly uncomfortable with what she was about to say. You spend a lot of time talking? Don't you worry about efficiency? The beekeeper, she still didn't know his name, looked at her with something that might have been amusement. Efficiency toward what goal? Making more money so I can spend less time with people? That seems backward. Most businesses would kill for your foot traffic. You could easily double your sales if you streamlined the interactions. Double my sales? Cut my conversations in half. Then what? Buy a bigger table? Hire someone else to talk to my customers? At that point, why am I even here? He leaned back on his stool. You never told me your name. Victoria Hastings. Darius Maxwell. He extended his hand, and she shook it, noting the calluses and the gentle strength. Victoria, I'm going to guess something about you. You measure your worth by what you accomplish, and you accomplish a lot. You're successful by every definition society gives you. But somewhere deep down, you're starting to wonder if those definitions are right. The words hit harder than they should have. You don't know anything about me. Maybe not. But I know you keep coming back to buy honey you don't need, and you look at me like you're waiting for me to sell you something that can't fit in a jar. His voice wasn't unkind. I'm not trying to offend you. I'm just observing what I see. Victoria felt her face flush. I come here because it's convenient, and your honey is decent, that's all. Okay. Darius wrapped another jar without being asked. But just so you know, you're welcome here even if the real reason is something else. Sometimes people need a place where nobody wants anything from them except maybe a conversation. She paid quickly and left, his words chasing her down the cobblestones like accusations she couldn't answer. Victoria couldn't stop thinking about Darius. It annoyed her, this mental space he was taking up without permission. She tried to bury herself in work, in the acquisition that was entering its final phase, in the endless meetings where she performed brilliance like a trained athlete. But at night, alone in her penthouse with its view of the city's glittering indifference, his words came back to her. You measure your worth by what you accomplish. Was that wrong? What else was there to measure worth by? Good intentions didn't pay mortgages, or build companies, or lift families out of poverty. Her father had taught her that results were what mattered, that sentiment was a luxury for people who didn't have real responsibilities. But then she remembered the nurse, crying over being seen by a housekeeper. She remembered Darius asking about the woman's shift, actually caring about the answer. When was the last time Victoria had asked someone about their day and meant it? When was the last time someone had asked her? Her mother called on Friday evening. Darling, I haven't seen you in weeks. Come to brunch Sunday. Your father wants to discuss the acquisition. Of course he did. Mom, can I ask you something? Do you think Dad's happy? There was a pause, the sound of ice clinking in a glass. What a strange question. Your father is successful, respected, powerful. What else would he need? I don't know. Connection? Purpose beyond the company? Victoria, you sound like you've been watching too many TED Talks. Your father's purpose is providing for his family and building something lasting. That's not nothing. That's everything. Her mother's voice took on a sharper edge. You're not having second thoughts about the promotion, are you? Because there are plenty of people who would kill for your position. No, Mom. I'm fine. Just tired. But she wasn't fine. She was standing on the balcony of her expensive apartment, looking down at the people moving through the streets below, and wondering if Darius was right. Maybe she was waiting for someone to sell her something that couldn't fit in a jar. Maybe she'd been buying the wrong things her entire life. Sunday brunch was at her parents' Mercer Island estate, where the lawn rolled down to the lake, and everything was carefully maintained by people her family barely noticed. Her father dominated the conversation, excited about the acquisition, about Victoria's trajectory, about legacy and empire. You'll be CEO within 2 years, he predicted, his smile sharp with satisfaction. And then we'll take Pinnacle public. You'll be worth $50 million before you're 40. And then what? Victoria asked quietly. Then you'll be worth $100 million before you're 50. He laughed. Victoria, this is what we worked for. This is the prize. She looked at her father, really looked at him, and saw a man who'd spent his entire life chasing a number that could never be big enough. She saw her future written in his face, successful, powerful, and profoundly lonely. Hello, the Shade of Love family. So happy you're here. Before we jump into the next part of the story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments. Also, how's the story been so far? We love reading your thoughts. Yes, every single comment. And it really keeps us motivated. Let's aim for 50 comments on this video. Think we can hit it? Your support means the world. So don't forget to comment, share, and keep the energy flowing. Victoria started going to the market every day. Not just for honey, but to watch Darius interact with the world. She told herself it was anthropological curiosity, research into alternative business models. But really, she was trying to understand how someone could seem so content with so little. One afternoon, a young mother approached his table, her 2 children hanging on her arms. She picked up a jar, checked the price, then set it down with visible disappointment. Maybe next week, she told her kids, who deflated immediately. Darius caught Victoria's eye for just a second before turning back to the family. Hey, I just remembered something. I'm testing a new honey blend, and I need honest opinions. Would your kids be willing to try it and tell me what they think? The mother hesitated. We couldn't afford to pay for extra. No charge. This is market research. He pulled out a jar and 3 wooden honey dippers. Here, take this home. Try it for a week, and come back with your honest review. If you hate it, you've done me a favor. If you love it, well, maybe you'll buy one next month. The children's faces lit up. The mother's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Really, thank you. After they left, Victoria stepped forward. That was generous. That was business. Darius arranged his remaining jars. She'll come back, and she'll bring friends. Word of mouth from someone who feels seen is worth more than any advertising campaign. You gave away a $12 jar. I invested $12 in a relationship that might last years. Your company would call that customer acquisition cost. He smiled. I'm not naive, Victoria. I understand economics. I just define value differently than most people. An older woman approached, and Victoria recognized her from previous visits. Darius, honey, I brought you something. She handed him a container of soup. You mentioned you weren't feeling great last week. This is my grandmother's recipe. Fixes everything. Miss Denise, you didn't have to do this. Hush. You gave my grandson a job last summer when nobody else would. Called him reliable after every other place called him a liability. She patted his hand. He's in community college now. Doing real good. After she left, Victoria said, She called you reliable. What did you do? Jerome had some misdemeanor charges. Nothing violent, just stupid teenager stuff. But it meant nobody would hire him. So I taught him about beekeeping, paid him to help me during harvest season. He's a good kid who made some mistakes. Everybody deserves a second chance. That's risky. What if he'd stolen from you? Darius looked at her steadily. Then I would have lost some honey, and he would have lost something more important. The chance to prove he was worth believing in. But he didn't steal. He worked harder than I expected. And now he's building a different future. That's not risky. That's just being human to another human. Victoria thought about her company's hiring practices, the background checks that automatically disqualified anyone with a record, the way they defined risk as anything that couldn't be quantified and controlled. She thought about all the Jeromes who never got a second chance, because people like her had decided efficiency mattered more than possibility. You make me feel ashamed, she said quietly. That's not my intention. Darius wrapped a jar of honey without asking. I just think maybe you've been taught that caring is weakness, and I'm here to tell you it's the only strength that actually matters. The acquisition closed on a Tuesday morning, and Victoria became the youngest COO in Pinnacle's history, with a clear path to CEO. There was champagne in the boardroom, congratulations from colleagues who wanted her favor, emails from headhunters offering even more ridiculous salaries. She should have been celebrating. Instead, she felt hollow. That afternoon, Derek cornered her in the hallway. Some of us are going out tonight to celebrate. You're coming, right? We're hitting that new place in Belltown. I might skip it. I'm tired. You've been weird lately. Derek lowered his voice. People are noticing. You're distracted in meetings, you're not as aggressive on pitches. Don't lose focus now, Victoria. You're so close to the top. What if the top isn't where I want to be? He laughed like she'd told a joke. That's the pressure talking. Take a vacation after the transition settles. Go to Bali, clear your head. But don't start questioning the fundamentals. We're winners, Victoria. That's who we are. At dinner with her parents that week, her mother brought up Victoria's social media presence. Darling, you need to post more. Other executives your age are building their brands. You look almost invisible online. I'm busy actually working, Mom. Image is work. Her father cut in, his tone sharp. You think I built this company just by being good at my job? I built relationships, cultivated influence, made sure the right people saw me winning. You're COO now. Start acting like it. Victoria pushed her salmon around her plate. Dad, do you know the names of the people who clean your office? What? No, why would I? Just wondering. She met his eyes. Do you ever think about what their lives are like? If they have enough? If they're happy? Her father's expression hardened. Victoria, I pay them a fair wage for their labor. That's the extent of our relationship. I'm not their friend, I'm their employer. The moment you start confusing those roles is the moment you lose your edge. What if I want to lose my edge? Then you'll lose everything else too. He set down his fork. I don't know what's gotten into you, but snap out of it. Sentiment doesn't pay for this house or your penthouse or your future. Ruthless competence does. I raised you better than this. Victoria left early, driving aimlessly through the city until she found herself parked near Pike Place Market. It was closed, the stalls dark and empty, but she could see where Darius's table would be in the morning. She imagined him there, patient and present, measuring success by conversations instead of conversions. And she wondered when she'd stopped believing there was any other way to live. Her phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Heard about the promotion. Congratulations. Also heard you're having an existential crisis. Want to talk? Victoria typed and deleted 3 responses before finally writing, I think I've been wrong about everything that matters. Amanda's response was immediate. Good. That's the first step. The next morning, Victoria showed up at Darius's table before the market officially opened. He was arranging jars, humming something low and melodic. When he saw her, he didn't seem surprised. You're early. He gestured to a second stool behind his table. Coffee? She nodded, and he poured from a thermos that had seen better days. It was the best coffee she'd tasted in months, simple and strong and honest. I need to ask you something, Victoria said. How do you do it? How do you live like this and not feel like you're losing? Darius took his time answering. What am I losing? I have a home I own outright. I have work that connects me to nature and community. I have time to read, to think, to notice things. My grandmother raised me to believe that enough is a feast, and I've found that to be true. But don't you want more? Don't you want to build something bigger to prove you can? Prove to who, and why? He turned to face her fully. Victoria, I grew up in the Central District before it got expensive. My grandfather was a Pullman porter. My grandmother cleaned houses. They worked themselves to exhaustion so my mother could go to college, and she worked herself sick so I could have options. I chose this, bees and honey and conversations with strangers, because I saw what the other path costs. It costs your presence, your peace, your ability to see another person as anything other than a transaction or an obstacle. Victoria felt tears threatening, which horrified her. I just became COO of a major company. Everyone says I should be celebrating, but I feel emptier than I did as an intern. That's because you achieved something you thought you wanted, and now you're realizing the wanting was the lie. Darius's voice was gentle. You didn't want that job. You wanted to prove your worth. But worth isn't something you prove, Victoria. It's something you accept. I don't know how to accept it. I've spent my whole life earning it. Then maybe it's time to learn a different way. He poured more coffee. Can I tell you what I see when I look at you? I see someone brilliant and capable who's terrified that if she stops performing, people will realize she's just human. But being human isn't the thing you should be afraid of. It's the only thing worth being. Victoria let the tears fall then, right there in the market as vendors set up around them, and the morning light turned the Puget Sound gold. I don't know who I am without the performance. Then let's find out. Darius handed her his bandana to dry her eyes. No pressure, No expectations. Just see what happens when you stop trying to win and start trying to live. A woman approached the table, and Darius greeted her warmly. Victoria watched him work, seeing it clearly now, how he treated every interaction as sacred, how he made space for people to be fully themselves, how he measured richness by depth instead of breadth. And she understood finally what she'd been buying all these weeks. Not honey. Hope that a different kind of life was possible. The breaking point came during a strategy meeting 2 weeks later. Victoria was presenting the roadmap for Pinnacle's next phase: aggressive expansion, targeted acquisitions, workforce optimization that was corporate speak for layoffs. The board loved it. Her father beamed with pride. Derek gave her a thumbs up from across the table. But Victoria couldn't stop thinking about Jerome, the kid Darius had given a second chance. She looked at the spreadsheet projected on the wall, at the line labeled Workforce Reduction 127 positions, and saw 127 Jeromes, whose second chances were being eliminated for the sake of a 3% increase in quarterly returns. Victoria? Her father's voice cut through her thoughts. You were going to walk us through the timeline. She stood there, laser pointer in hand, and something inside her snapped. I can't do this. What do you mean you can't? Just read the slides. No, I mean I can't do this anymore. Any of it. She set down the pointer. We're about to destroy 127 lives so we can tell shareholders we're efficient. But we're not efficient. We're cruel. We're looking at human beings as expenses to be minimized instead of people with families and mortgages and dreams. The conference room went silent. Her father's face turned dangerous. Victoria, you need to step outside and collect yourself. I'm completely collected, Dad. Maybe for the first time in my life. She looked around the table at the shocked faces. I quit. The aftermath was explosive. Her father followed her to her office, his voice low and furious. You will not throw away everything we've built because you're having some kind of breakdown. It's not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. Victoria started packing her personal items, awards she didn't care about, photos of accomplishments that felt meaningless. You built this company on the belief that winning justifies everything. But I don't want to win anymore. I want to matter. You matter because you win. No, Dad. I win because I was afraid that if I didn't, I wouldn't matter. But I was wrong. And so are you. She picked up her box. I love you, but I can't become you. She drove straight to Pike Place Market, arriving in the afternoon chaos. Darius saw her coming, took in her tear-streaked face and the box of office supplies, and simply made room for her behind his table. Bad day? He asked. Best day. Victoria laughed through tears. I just quit my job, disappointed my father, and probably destroyed my reputation, and I feel more alive than I have in years. Good. Darius handed her a honey dipper. Want to help me sell some honey? I don't know how. Sure you do. You just talk to people like they matter. Because they do. He smiled. Everything else is just details. A teenager approached, counting coins in his palm. Victoria watched Darius greet him like an old friend, ask about his day, and accept exact change for a jar of honey with the same grace he'd shown everyone else. And she understood that this wasn't just a different way of doing business. It was a different way of being human. Can I ask you something? Victoria said during a quiet moment. Why did you spend so much time with me when I was so awful at the beginning? You weren't awful. You were scared. And people who are scared deserve patience, not judgment. Darius rearranged his jars. Besides, I could tell you were looking for something real. It just took you a while to admit it. That evening, sitting on a bench overlooking the Sound, with the city behind them, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the temporary absence of stress, but the deep, sustaining peace that comes from being aligned with your own truth. It wouldn't last, she knew. There would be hard conversations, financial adjustments, identity reconstruction. But for the first time, she was ready to face all of it as herself, not as the person she'd been taught to be. The next 3 months were the most challenging and liberating of Victoria's life. She moved out of her penthouse into a modest apartment in Capitol Hill. She started volunteering at a community center 3 blocks from Darius's beekeeping operation in Beacon Hill. She learned that wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts, but in morning conversations, in shared meals, in the slow accumulation of moments that actually mattered. Her parents stopped speaking to her. Friends from her old life drifted away, uncomfortable with her transformation. But new relationships formed. Denise, who taught her to make soup. Jerome, who showed her his college essays. The nurse from the market, who invited her to a shift workers' support group. One Saturday, Darius asked if she wanted to see the hives. They drove to Beacon Hill in his ancient truck, windows down, radio playing old Motown. The hives sat in a community garden, surrounded by wildflowers and vegetable plots tended by neighbors who greeted Darius by name. "This is where the magic happens," he said, suiting her up in protective gear. "Ready?" Victoria nodded, her heart pounding. But when Darius opened the first hive, and the bees rose in a golden cloud, she felt only wonder. He showed her the queen, explained the colony's organization, the way each bee knew its purpose, and worked toward the collective good without anyone telling it to compete or dominate or win. "They're smarter than we are," Victoria observed. "In some ways, yeah. They understand that individual success means nothing if the hive fails. That cooperation isn't weakness, it's survival." He closed the hive carefully. "Humans forget that. We think we're islands, but we're not. We're colonies, whether we admit it or not." At the community center that evening, Victoria helped Denise prepare dinner for 40 people. It was nothing fancy. Spaghetti, salad, garlic bread, but the room filled with laughter and conversation, and the particular warmth that comes from breaking bread with people who see you as human, not as useful or impressive or worth networking with, just human. Jerome found her afterward, nervous and excited. "Miss Victoria, I wanted to tell you, I got accepted into the University of Washington. Full scholarship. I'm going to study environmental science." "Jerome, that's incredible." She hugged him, genuinely proud. "Darius wrote one of my recommendation letters. He told them about the beekeeping, about what I learned about ecosystems and responsibility. He made me sound like I was somebody worth investing in." Jerome's voice cracked. "Nobody ever did that before. Nobody saw past my mistakes. That's what he does. He sees people." Victoria glanced across the room at Darius, who was helping an elderly man with his coat. "He sees what's possible, not just what's profitable." That night, walking home through the neighborhood, Darius asked her, "Any regrets?" "Not one." Victoria breathed in the night air, cool and clean. "My old life was like living in a gilded cage, beautiful, expensive, suffocating. This feels like breathing for the first time. It won't always be easy. Sometimes you'll miss the comfort. I know, but I'd rather struggle toward something real than succeed at something hollow." She stopped, making him turn to face her. "Thank you, for being patient with me, for showing me there was another way. You found your own way, Victoria. I just sold you some honey while you figured it out." Darius smiled. "Though I have to say, you're my most expensive customer. A year of daily jars. That's a lot of bees working overtime." She laughed. "Best investment I ever made." Hello, the Shade of Love family. So happy you're here. Before we jump into the next part of the story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments. Also, how's the story been so far? We love reading your thoughts. Yes, every single comment. And it really keeps us motivated. Let's aim for 50 comments on this video. Think we can hit it? Your support means the world, so don't forget to comment, share, and keep the energy flowing. Victoria's public stand came unexpectedly. A journalist from the Seattle Times was doing a feature on Seattle's youngest executives, where are they now, and tracked Victoria down at the community center. She was teaching a financial literacy class to teenagers, something she'd started after realizing how many people had never been taught basic money management. "Victoria Hastings," the journalist said, recognition lighting his face. "You disappeared from the corporate world. Rumor was you had a breakdown." Victoria straightened, aware of the teenagers watching. "I had a breakthrough, and I'm happy to go on record about it." The interview ran the following Sunday, front page of the business section. Victoria had been honest, brutally, completely honest. She talked about the emptiness of executive success, the moral bankruptcy of profit over people models, The way corporate America taught young leaders to see human beings as resources to be exploited. She named Pinnacle specifically, detailed the layoffs she'd refused to implement, explained why she'd walked away from guaranteed wealth. "I thought success meant having more," she was quoted saying. "A mentor showed me that success means being more, and you can't be fully human while treating others as less than human." The backlash was immediate. Her father released a statement calling her comments misguided and the result of personal instability. Former colleagues posted on LinkedIn about her betrayal and unprofessionalism. Business school forums debated whether she'd damaged her career beyond repair. But there was another response, too. Messages from young professionals who felt trapped in similar cages. Invitations to speak at universities about alternative definitions of success. Interview requests from podcasts and magazines interested in her transformation. And most surprisingly, a call from 3 former Pinnacle employees who wanted to start a cooperative consulting firm built on values instead of extraction. "They're calling you a traitor," Darius observed one evening at the market. He'd shown her the LinkedIn threads, the angry comments from her old world. "I know, and they're right, in a way. I did betray their value system, but I'm finally loyal to my own." Victoria helped him pack up for the day. "My father called me weak, said I threw away my legacy for some romanticized notion of purpose." "What did you tell him?" "That he's right about one thing. I did throw away his legacy, but I'm building my own now, and it's going to look completely different." She handed him a jar to wrap. "I don't need his approval anymore. I just need to be able to look at myself in the mirror." That weekend, Victoria spoke at a community forum about economic inequality. She stood at a podium in a church basement, facing 100 people from every walk of life, and told her truth. "I was taught that people like me earned our success, and people who struggled deserved their circumstances. I was taught that the system was fair, that cream rises to the top, that hard work always pays off. I was taught to confuse privilege with merit and luck with virtue." The room was silent, intent. "I was wrong, and more importantly, I was cruel. I looked at human beings and saw expenses. I measured worth by productivity. I justified inequality by calling it meritocracy." Her voice caught. "I'm standing here tonight to say that I'm sorry. To everyone I hurt with my policies, my blind spots, my arrogance, and to tell you that change is possible. Not easy, but possible. We can build different systems. We just have to care more about people than profit." The applause started slowly, then built. Afterward, people lined up to talk to her, not to network or seek favors, but to share their own stories of transformation, of questioning, of choosing different paths. A woman in her 50s hugged her and whispered, "Thank you for saying out loud what so many of us feel but are afraid to admit." Victoria found Darius waiting outside, leaning against his truck. "How'd it go?" "Scary. Liberating." "Right." She climbed into the passenger seat. "My old self would have been mortified. This version of me just feels free." A year after Victoria first bought honey from Darius's table, she stood in the same spot at Pike Place Market. But everything had changed. She was there as his business partner now, having used her savings to help him expand into a cooperative that employed 6 formerly incarcerated people and sourced from a dozen local beekeepers. They called it Hive Collective, and it was nothing like her old company. Messy, imperfect, built on trust instead of contracts. The morning was cool, the market just opening, and Victoria arranged jars while Darius set up their new banner. They'd grown, but not in the way Pinnacle would have measured growth. They'd grown deeper instead of wider, more connected instead of more efficient. "You ever miss it?" Darius asked, reading her thoughts the way he'd learned to do. "The power, the prestige, the certainty of that world?" Victoria considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it, having clear metrics, knowing exactly what success looked like. But then I remember how hollow it felt, how disconnected. And I realize I don't miss it. I miss the illusion that it was enough." A familiar face approached. Amanda, her business school friend, looking tired and uncertain. "Victoria, I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. I know I haven't been supportive." "Amanda," Victoria hugged her. "What brings you by? I've been following your journey, reading your interviews, watching you build something different." Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "I'm miserable, Victoria. I made partner last month, and all I could think was, is this it? I work 80 hours a week for people I don't like, selling solutions to problems we created, and I'm so tired of pretending it matters." "Then stop pretending." Victoria pulled over a stool. "Sit. Let's talk." They spent an hour there, Victoria sharing her story, while Darius served customers, and the market came alive around them. She told Amanda about the fear, the freedom, the daily choice to live differently, and she watched her old friend's face transform from desperation to possibility. "I don't know if I can do what you did," Amanda admitted. "Walk away from everything. You don't have to do it my way, you just have to find your way. But I promise you, the cost of staying in a life that's killing your soul is higher than the cost of leaving." Victoria squeezed her hand. "Whatever you decide, you're not alone." After Amanda left, promising to think seriously about her choices, Darius wrapped an arm around Victoria's shoulders. "Look at you, passing on the philosophy. I learned from the best." She leaned into him, comfortable in a way she'd never been in her old life. They'd become something more than friends over the months. Partners in every sense, building not just a business but a life that reflected their shared values. It wasn't the romance she'd imagined in her corporate days, all grand gestures and expensive dates. It was quieter, truer, woven into daily choices and shared purpose. Jerome stopped by on his way to class, now a sophomore at UW and thriving. Denise dropped off soup. The nurse from their early days brought co-workers to stock up on honey for the hospital break room. Each interaction was brief but meaningful, a thread in the larger web they were weaving. Community instead of competition. Connection instead of conquest. As the afternoon sun slanted across the market and the crowd thinned, Victoria looked at the jars of honey catching the light and thought about the journey that had brought her here. A year ago, she'd been a woman who measured worth by wealth and success, by superiority. Now she measured worth by impact and success by alignment, living in a way that matched her deepest values. "What are you thinking?" Darius asked, packing up for the day. "I'm thinking about bees, how they work together, how they build something sweet from their daily labor, how they're all essential to the hive's survival." Victoria smiled. "I spent so much time trying to be the queen bee, the most important, the most successful. But I'm happier being just one bee among many, doing my part." "That's the philosophy." Darius closed the last box. "We're all just bees. Victoria, some of us just take longer to figure it out." They walked through the market as vendors closed up shop, headed toward Darius's truck and whatever the evening would bring. Victoria's phone buzzed. 3 messages from former executives asking about her cooperative model. 2 from universities requesting speaking engagements. 1 from her mother saying simply, "I'm proud of you," after months of silence. She'd lost her corner office and her path to CEO. She'd lost her father's approval and her place in the world she'd known. But she'd gained something infinitely more valuable. A life she didn't need to escape from. Work that fed her soul. Relationships built on authenticity instead of utility. She'd traded certainty for purpose, and it was the best deal she'd ever made. "Thank you," she said to Darius, as they drove through the city she was learning to see with new eyes. "For what? For selling me honey every day for a year when what I really needed was a mirror? For being patient while I figured out who I actually was underneath all the performance?" She reached across to take his hand. "For showing me that there's more than one way to be successful, and only one way to be human. That's what the honey was for." Darius smiled, squeezing her hand. "Everything else was just you, becoming who you were always meant to be." The city lights flickered on as evening settled over Seattle, and Victoria watched them from the passenger seat of an old truck, headed toward a modest apartment and a life that would never make headlines. But it was hers, authentic, purposeful, and finally enough. She'd bought her first jar of honey thinking it was just honey. She'd learned, through daily returns and patient conversations, that it was actually an invitation to a different kind of life. And she'd accepted that invitation, one jar at a time, one conversation at a time, one choice at a time, until the woman she'd been was just a memory, and the woman she'd become was gloriously, imperfectly beautifully real. The transformation wasn't complete. Transformation never is. But it was ongoing, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.